careful flying in freezing fog. If you're gonna take one thing away from watching my content, let it be this, as this will increase the chance of you losing your drone. The danger is real and it will happen almost instantly, and you will have a hard time controlling the aircraft. So what is this all about? Yeah, luckily you have me, and I have taken one for the team and actually went out flying under these conditions so I can show you what actually happens when you are flying in freezing fog. All of this started one of the members of my Danish Facebook group that provided some photos of his props after he landed his drone. He has been out flying in foggy conditions, and as you can see from these images, it's really severely over-icing. And I can't even imagine how he was able to control and safely land the aircraft because of this. Because the propeller is just an airfoil, and by adding anything on top of that, you will reduce how effective it is. Icing on the prop can happen almost instantly, and we will talk about the reasons why just in a second, and will reduce the capabilities of producing thrust. Depending on the distribution, it might cause balance problems as well. So what is this fog that you're talking about? Fog is basically a cloud that touches the ground. Fog shows up when water vapor or water in a gaseous form condenses. During condensation, molecules of water vapor combine to make liquid water droplets that hang in the air. You can see fog because of these tiny water droplets. Water vapor is a gas and is per definition invisible. There has to be a lot of water vapor in the air for the fog to form. With the risk of this being a science lesson, dust or particles needs to be present in the air. Water vapor then condenses around these microscopic solid particles. As an example, sea fog that we have seen in many movies and images close to the shoreline, where the water vapor condenses around the salt particles in the air. Don't mistake fog for mist. Fog is way denser than mist, cutting down the visibility significantly. So what we need to be careful about when we are out flying is a phenomenon that's called freezing fog. Let's just take the definition of that one. Freezing fog occurs when the temperature falls at 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius or below. The fog produces drizzle, and these tiny droplets freeze when they come into contact with an object. In this case, our propeller. But at the same time, there's a sublimation going on, meaning a phase shift where the gas goes into solid, skipping the liquid phase, making it occur even faster. But of course, this was super scary, but it also made me a little bit curious what would happen if I actually flew under these conditions. So my all beat up Mini 2 was basically my test subject. So looking out the window at this parking lot where I normally fly, it seems that the fog was pretty dense, and that would be ideal conditions for me to fly. So the temperature was ideal for this experiment. It was around 0 Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit, which is kind of aligns with the definition of when freezing fog occurs. And it was also very foggy in the area. Flying around the area back and forward in sport mode, in non-sport mode, circling around, going up and down, did not manage to provoke this situation, at least nothing that would interfere with the flying characteristics of the drone. And after 5, 6, 8 minutes, I decided to land the drone just to see if any teeny weeny spots of ice has formed on the props. But nothing. Nothing happened, even though there was zero visibility when I was hanging in the air. So I almost gave up trying to reproduce this scenario, but those of you that know me would know that I don't give up that easy. So on my way to work, I noticed that there was a field that I was driving by where the fog was really dense. It was actually zero visibility, maybe in less than 10-15 meters above the ground. So I decided to go there and give it another go. So I launched the drone, and around 30 to 40 meters, the visibility got really bad. Then I changed the altitude to 110, 120 meters, which is the maximum limitation here where I live, which is something that DJI should know, so disregard this warning. And because you can't see anything when you're flying under these conditions, it's impossible to see the drone. It is impossible to see anything from the camera feed because it's so foggy outside. So I had to switch it into the map view to complete the testing, because there I can use the triangular shape of the drone to sort of navigate around the landscape and then make sure that I didn't fly in areas where I was not supposed to fly. Then I was running low on battery, and then the drone decided to restrict the power of the battery. So I was almost giving up on this experiment to see if I could complete it. But I continued to give it a go to see, to sort of maximize whatever I could get out of this battery to see if I could make anything happen. Flying back and forward a few times. With 3 minutes and 21 seconds left, I got the first warning. Motor error, check propellers and fly with caution. Then I knew something was going on. But the error message cleared, so I decided to continue. And reduce the altitude a bit, but still high enough to maintain its position in the freezing fog. 20 seconds later, the error message reoccurred, and then I was pretty sure that we were onto something. I was starting to worry seriously if this was a good idea. But on the other hand, I was over a field with soft grass, so in case that the drone would eventually crash from the sky, then I would be able to go and pick it up at least. I switched the drone into sport mode and rearranged the map so I could use the triangular shape of the drone to fly back to my home position, at least so I didn't have to go and look a lot for the drone in case something happened. At the time it was perfect. As I was descending close to the car, I got the dreaded message, max power load reached, fly with caution. And the reason why we see this warning is because ice has likely started to form on the front edge of the prop, messing with the aerodynamic properties of the propeller. So what you can see now, if you take a closer look at the drone, you can see there's a nice ice edge formed on the leading edge of the propeller. And if I just press it very gently, you can see that these flakes of ice, they are actually popping off. And this is definitely something that is going to destroy the flying capabilities or the thrust capabilities of each motor. So what will happen is when you're out flying and ice starts to occur on the props is that you will get this warning message that the maximum load has been reached. And then at some point, even though it's trying, it can't produce enough lift to keep the drone airborne. So what you will experience is that even though you push full throttle, it will still descend regardless what you do. And if this is over water, then you will run into some serious problems. As well as if you are flying over forest areas or areas where you can't access the drone if it goes down, because it will go down. It's just a matter of where it will go down. Keeping the drone for a couple of minutes inside the car, you can see that the amount of water that's actually being deposited as ice on the props. This is crazy. And it happened very, very fast. The total flight from takeoff was around 6 minutes. And by that short flight time, under these conditions, you will end up in a scenario like this. This was, of course, a controlled experiment, but as you can imagine, you have to be really, really careful. So if you end up in a situation, this was not particularly bad over icing, but if I've continued to fly under these conditions, I'm pretty sure that I would not have been able to keep the drone airborne. So how do I deal with this situation if I'm forced to go out and fly? I have no real good answer for this other than shortening your flight time. But you might have experienced and encountered situations like this and have a good tip that you want to share with the Tech Drone Media community. Feel free to share it with the rest of us in the comments below. In case you're wondering in general how a drone fly, I made a pretty good video covering all the basics of how a quadcopter operates. It includes a lot of cool slow motion recordings that will give you an insight into how the drone actually operates. In case you want to brush off your basic knowledge, then you can access this video through this card. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then feel free to give it a like. If you didn't like it, feel free to press the dislike button twice. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you around.